Please welcome the panel on From Experience to Excellence, Women Redefining Business and Financial Wellness, moderated by Cheryl Wudunn, co-founder of Full Sky Partners and co-owner of Christoph Wines.
Hello, we're delighted to be here and thank you so much for coming. So I'm going to actually open the panel with an introduction and then introduce everybody they don't need any introduction. So let's be honest. The old script of how women are supposed to age is broken. Women are tearing it up. Midlife is no longer a winding down, but actually a gearing up. Women are living longer than men, earning more degrees, starting more businesses at twice the rate of men. And the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs, women over 45. That's not a footnote. That's a power shift. Why? Because the system wasn't built for women with ambition and aging parents and mortgages and hot flashes. So instead of waiting for the system to catch up, women are building their own. They're reinventing careers, demanding flexibility, and bringing decades of wisdom and grit to the table. They're not just chasing success. They're defining it on their own terms. Success that includes health, wealth, and purpose. But here's the kicker. For all this momentum, women still face the hard stats. 2/3 of Alzheimer's cases, women. We spend 25% more of our lives in poor health than men and end up with 30% less in retirement. That's not just unfair, it's unsustainable. So today's conversation, it's not your typical wellness panel. It's about flipping the script. It's about how women are blending financial savvy with brain health, with longevity, with leadership. Purpose with paychecks. So, and these are not in separate lanes. It's everything all at once and unapologetically. So this isn't also about work-life balance. This is about power and how women are claiming it, physically, mentally, and financially. So let's dive in. So, to my far left, we have Michelle Troney from Zinnia. We have Penny Pennington from Edward Jones. We have Lauren Miller-Rogan from Hilarity for Charity, and Sheila Lirio-Marcello from Ohai.ai. So let's start with the personal. Each of you is tackling a problem that traditional systems have ignored, whether in caregiving, financial planning, technology, or insurance. What is the problem you're now trying to tackle, to solve, and what pushed you to build something new instead of waiting for the system to catch up? So let's start with you.
Great.
Michelle.
Thank you. So what I'm trying to do with our company at Zinnia is enable financial longevity, right? We work in the field of life and annuity insurance, not the sexiest of financial products, but super important for people throughout their lifetime, right? We believe that financial longevity is key to a happy, healthy life, and we're using technology and data to really change the way that the game is played, right? We're building the modern rails that sit behind wealth management firms, sit behind insurance manufacturers, and work for consumers. We strongly believe that if the market, if everything is easier, if you can simplify this, the market grows and everybody gets better.
And so what was the main problem that you're trying to solve for women?
This is for women, we deal with all kinds of personas, but particularly for women. The products that we support are very complicated, right? They last for a very long time, and they're not necessarily historically designed for every walk of life, like for all the periods in your life, right? So many new products are being brought to the market. They're complicated. And so people turn away from things that are complicated. If you can't see what value your product is on your wealth statement, in your bank statement, if you can't feel like you can get access to it, you don't trust it. If you don't trust it, you don't do it. And so what we really feel, and especially for women, we've been dealing with so many fantastic women in the last year or so that honestly say, they're too complicated. We're too afraid to get involved because we just don't understand it, and so we ignore it. And then we find people who have had life-changing events where, these long, non-linear careers, mean that they have to be out of the marketplace for a year, or they decide to do something different, or their health means they can't get insurance, and it's too late because they didn't do it early enough. So we want to educate people early, use technology and data to change the game, and to get people buying products that are really good for themselves and for their families.
Great. Penny.
Sure. The challenge is that more people need and want financial advice, but they don't know where to get it, what questions to ask. Some don't even know that financial advice is available to them. And so Edward Jones, for 103 years, has worked to solve this gap. As it relates to women in particular, we are in the midst of a $124 trillion wealth transfer, the largest transference of wealth that has ever happened in civilization. 2/3 of that initial transfer is going to go actuarially from a man to a woman of the same generation. Much of the research says when she gets that money after the death of her spouse, she often looks for a different financial advisor. Often that's because she has different concerns. She wonders if she's weird because she wants to talk more about her kids and her grandkids and her purpose than today's returns on the investment portfolio. Let me tell you, if any of you are wondering if you're strange because you want to talk about that, you are not. And so speak up. So because of this wealth transfer that is happening today, much of the money is going to go into the hands of women of an older generation, and then within just a few years, it's going to transfer to the next 3 generations. They are putting together money and meaning in a very different way. And so as women, as we think about this wealth transference and what matters to us, we will actually reshape the economy and the investment markets based on the decisions that we make. That's the challenge and the opportunity that we're leaning into.
So Penny, I have a question. So if there's a financial advisor and there's a client who's a woman, at the stage of change that you're talking about, first of all, men can do the same, male advisors can do the same thing. What is it that is a little bit different about, coaching or advising a woman in that stage than a man?
Yeah. Well, I want to be very clear. We have 20,000 financial advisors. About 26% of our financial advisors are women. Our male financial advisors are deeply empathetic and have tremendous skills and powers of listening. Our women financial advisors have the same, and they've also lived in a woman's shoes, right? So I want to be very, very clear that in getting financial advice, it's not that the person that you're getting advice has to look like you, but they have to be willing and able to think not just about you, but like you. And so in talking to our women clients, because that's what we're talking about here, as we talk to all of our clients, we want to talk to them about their health, their family, their purpose, and then their financial plan. The reason that we want to talk about those 4 things is because that's what our clients and investors told us they want to talk about. We did the largest survey of folks thinking about retirement that had ever been done right at the moment of COVID. We actually wondered, should we do this at the time of COVID? Well, the insight was, actually, this may remake the way people think about their money. And when we learn that people are concerned about their health, because health and wealth are two sides of the same coin, their family, because intergenerational transfer and just the transfer of legacy that families are concerned about, their purpose, like what is this all about anyway? And then put all of that together into a financial plan, turning one's life plan into a financial plan. What you have to think about then is legacy, lifestyle, longevity, and your goals associated with all of those things. The investment portfolio will come along in order to enable all of that. But it is the trusted relationship between an advisor and a family that brings all of that to life, and the challenge to solve today.
Great. Lauren.
Unfortunately, dementia was a part of my life since I was very young on my mom's side. My grandfather was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. My grandmother on my mom's side had dementia. And then just before my 25th birthday and her 55th birthday, my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Just like anyone who faces that situation, we were terrified and scared. We spent a few years flailing around and then eventually realized that my husband and I had a voice and we had an opportunity to bring people together to raise money, to do something. So we threw an event, we raised some money, and then we thought, well, what should we do with this money? It's not enough for a cure. Maybe we could help people today that are going through it right now in this moment, just like my family was. And that's how our mission became clear, to care for caregivers, and ultimately, once we learned more about science, to help people care for their brains. Of course, we've learned along the way that the majority of caregivers are, of course, women. Alzheimer's dementia affects more women than men. And so keeping all that in mind, we've, of course, created coursework to teach people, young people, men and women, about caring for their brains. What can they do now to make sure that their brain is healthy 20 to 30 years from now, while also providing all sorts of care, symposiums, anything that can help someone in their journey as a caregiver, including, introductions to financial companies, because obviously that's a huge piece of the caregiving puzzle. Care is so expensive. And so our goal and my goal is to make anyone's journey through dementia a bit more manageable, a bit more doable.
Right. So, of course, everybody says, okay, do crossword puzzles, do all sorts of things. What is it that we should at least give some advice, like 2 things that we can do for our brain health?
Oh, gosh. Well, the first thing that anyone could do for their brain health is sleep. It's free. You're in control of it. You can set your own bedtime. You can do little things to improve the quality of your sleep. We give a lot of the advice, but I do many things, from weighted blankets to white noise to consistent bedtimes is a huge one. Masks, just the proper sleep hygiene, if you will. And sleep is the best thing you could do for your brain. It's when your brain is taking out the trash, essentially. You can picture the janitor in there just sort of scooping it all out while you're sleeping. And then I would say it's a toss-up between everyone's favorite, exercise and good nutrition. Listen, I have sugar sometimes. I'm a human being, but we can eat for our brains. We can consider choices that will help our brains. We hear the Mediterranean diet is, of course, very helpful. And then, I know you said 2, but exercise is huge.
That's right.
Moving our bodies.
So you're saying that sugar is not just bad for your health, but for your brain too. It's bad for your brain.
Sugar is not your brain's friend. It's unfortunately not. But like I said, we're all humans. I think you have to do things in moderation. But the things that we can do today will affect the health of our brain down the road. Yeah. Science tells us that what happens in your brain happens 20 to 30 years before your diagnosis. So I'm in my early 40s now. I've been doing this since I was in my early 30s, because 20 to 30 years from this point, I want to make sure I've done everything I can to lead up to that.
So all those all-nighters in college, everyone, and all those.
And I did those, let me tell you, but
I
not anymore.
just had a question.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned
yes,
menopause.
of course, yeah.
How many hours of sleep are we talking about?
I mean, I think the general recommended is between 7 and 9 hours, but truthfully, quality is hugely important, the quality of your sleep. Before I started doing all these things to change my sleep hygiene, I was getting very poor quality rest. You can start by tracking it. There's all these wearables, so many things, watches, rings, etc., that can really give you a picture of how you sleep, because quality, deep sleep, REM, hugely important.
So naps don't help.
Oh, naps are great. I nap all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, don't nap during this, please.
Please, not during this, yeah.
Okay, please, Sheila.
Thank you for having me. So, as you know, Cheryl, I got pregnant earlier on in my career. I was born and raised in the Philippines, and inspired by taking care of my family, and became my priority. And then fast forward, my father fell backwards and had a heart attack when he was caring for our younger son. I've shared this story for a very long time. I founded a company called care.com in 2006. I scaled that. I ran it for 13 and a half years. I took it public, one of the first women that have taken a company public. And at the time, everyone was really surprised. Why weren't there more solutions in the care industry, Cheryl? And what's surprising to me, and also endearing, is that, last year, Melinda Gates hosted the first ever Care Summit. And I had already exited Care.com. And she invited me as one of the early speakers that opened up, and labeling me, I know I'm dating myself, Diane, as an OG. But the fact is that the care economy continues to be a problem. But what was inspirational was seeing 300 to 400 people in the audience. VCs, entrepreneurs, so many people caring deeply about the care economy and really trying to solve this care crisis that we have. But what I realized is that my work really wasn't done. I could have retired, but I found what inspired me was we were doing an ed tech company. At the time, I decided to be an operator again and was teaching generative AI, and my team actually showed me the technology. What's interesting is you've heard of prompt engineering, and then the next layer was inference, and then now agentic. Because we were teaching an advanced course on agentic AI, I said to my team, pause for a second. I said, wait, this technology can actually do things for developers to complete the code as a task. Can we use the same technology to help families? It's been in my heart for a very long time, and because I'm aware of the problems in the care economy. So guess what? We decided to quickly develop a virtual assistant or an operating system for families to make it easy. We get rid of the mundane task every day. Because what I found in the data on the Oxfam report is that 4 hours of unpaid labor that women are responsible for every day. Forget the fact that we're not paid equally when we're working the 8 hours. We're also doing an additional 4.8 hours of unpaid labor. If we can free up just 1 hour of that unpaid labor, that's $1 trillion of GDP. That's 2 countries right there, average per year. So my work certainly hasn't been done on the care economy with care.com, with care services. If Ai-jen Poo was up here, she would say that care is the work that makes all work possible. We figure out potholes, figuring out infrastructure, but if care is not great at home, we don't even want to show up for work because we can't care for our loved ones. We can't concentrate. What we're tackling now at Ojai.ai is the mental load. Vivek Murthy, our previous Surgeon General, actually said the #1 crisis in our country in the epidemic is parental stress. Wow. It impacts the raising of our next generation. So if we can solve the mental load that families are struggling through, why not solve productivity in the home? Billions of dollars of AI is going in to solve productivity at work. Why not productivity at home for the chief household officer, which I coined about 16, 17 years ago? It's the same role, what I'm doing now at Ojai.ai. But how do we help, especially women, free up this load so that they can just be, but guess what? Consistent meals with our families, focus on nutrition of our children, read a book regularly if we want to. So this is what's in my heart, and that's why I'm doing it again, Cheryl.
No, that's fascinating. It's so important. When I was living in Japan, I know that they had started very early trying to use AI to create sort of robotic cats to actually address loneliness because, of course, Japan is an aging society, and long ago they recognized that they're going to have to do something with all these aging people, especially women, and so they tried to develop this little cat that would be, a little partner, but it was too early back then. But maybe now.
Yeah, and a popular thing in our product is an avatar. She speaks to you, talks to you, and seniors like it because they feel they can actually engage with the AI. It's also very tangible. It's not a typable conversational AI. And in fact, one of the investors that we're talking to inspired me to say, can you just have an iPad and just click one button? And so if you have early onset, you don't have to worry about navigating to use something to actually help you throughout your day.
So we're on this topic, so let me just pose the question about entrepreneurship and the fact that I cited earlier about how women over 45 are just part of that avant-garde revolution in starting new businesses in entrepreneurship. So why is it that you think this is happening, and what advice can you give to women, since you're an entrepreneur, who are entering that phase?
Well, the first is, entrepreneurship, as we know, is pretty tough. It's grit, perseverance, and often I say it's the proximity to the issue and what's near and dear to your heart. And so I'm actually not surprised that the statistic is there, because we're trying to solve problems for ourselves, right? Whether it's menopause, whether it's these kinds of things, because I've heard that the data, especially on healthcare, is that we don't study women, older women, enough. Right? And so what I've been doing is really encourage women. I actually just wrote a piece for Fast Company that women over 50 are the prime real entrepreneurs that we should be really encouraging to innovate. Because sometimes we think, well, we're not young enough to really understand the technology or use the technology. But to me, the passion of being proximate to the issue, to have that lived experience that we're talking about, gets you through that. You become a problem solver. You come up with solution because you're living through it. And then guess what? Hire young people, get inspired by them, and you inspire them as a leader, right? And work intergenerationally to produce new solutions that can really help people. So I think it's the proximity to the issue, that I think it's raising women's awareness. There's a desire, and then there's the freedom of owning our own time, right? And having that freedom to do that. Advice that I would give, it is not for the faint of heart. My decision to go do this again, remember, I just said Care.com was 13 and a half years. It is a long haul commitment to your team, to your investors, and to the community that you're trying to serve. And I get this responsibility, and it's, the way to think about this is 5 to 10 years. So really know that you're passionate, right? And that you've got the grit, but please know that you have the experience, you have the knowledge and the wisdom. Don't let technology be the one to scare you. Partner, happy to talk to you if this is something that you're looking into, but I really try and encourage everyone to pursue what's in your heart, to help people and solve problems.
Thank you. Lauren, you've started Hilarity for Charity. What are your sort of lessons, and what have you learned?
I mean, I so deeply relate to what you just said. For us, my family was caring for my mom. My dad wanted to make the choice to keep my mom at home, and that care that we were bringing into the home was wildly expensive, basically unaffordable for most people. And so we sat back to this problem that was affecting my family every day deeply, but that money helped. And we created a grant program in which we provide respite care to people who are caring for their loved ones at home. And the money that we raised was able to make a dent. We've given close to 500,000 hours of care to people in the years that we've been doing this program. And, for me, having the experience as a daughter of Alzheimer's, I considered myself the caregiver to a caregiver, because my dad was my mom's primary caregiver. And I looked around and I saw that people feel alone and helpless, and they don't know what to do. And so, to your point, I let that answer the question that I was having, which is, what do I do? What do we all do? Here are the things that would help me: community, time, knowledge. And that's what we try to provide, whether it's, as I said before, care for caregivers, practical things that they can do every single day, teaching young people or anyone of any age about caring for their brain, and making sure that people don't feel scared and alone. Dementia can feel so overwhelming, but one step at a time, when you become part of a community, it becomes much more manageable.
Penny. So you obviously run a giant organization. You probably work with a lot of entrepreneurs. What is it that you have learned to help them, grow their businesses? And also, I mean, there are so many people within your, I mean, you said 20,000 financial advisors and many, many more, clients. Not everybody is really, really wealthy. Right. How do they start building wealth? Because they're probably going to have to be part of this care economy at some point in time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll connect to what you both have said. It really begins, the advice that we give really begins by understanding the passion of a family. What are their needs and wants and wishes? How are they thinking about those intergenerationally? And then how, as a very large company, how do we engage with them personally, but bring to them at scale tremendous resources? So one of the ways that we are doing that is through an entity called Edward Jones Ventures. Edward Jones Ventures is an in-house venture capital arm, but it is not intended to invest in companies in order to return a profit to Edward Jones. It is intended to connect great entrepreneurs and new technologies to a scaled organization that is helping 9 million clients and growing. And so I'll give you one example that really connects these two conversations. We've recently invested in a company called Water Lily. Water Lily is a woman founder. She saw her family devastated by the lack of resources or understanding about what was happening to them with a dementia diagnosis in the family. It pulled the family apart. It was a financial challenge, but it was more than that. And so she is a technologist, and she's applying AI to the data sets to help clients, to help investors plan earlier in the process, plan to prevent these things, but also to manage them as their families confront them over time. This is one example. We're also investing in a digital annuity platform, very akin to what you're talking about. But this is a way for great technologies and purpose-driven entrepreneurs to get scale into the financial advising marketplace.
So also, you've also been concerned a lot, Penny, about unequal distribution of wealth and how do you, create greater opportunities. So how do you build that wealth among sort of the people who are just at the cusp of trying to, get to something but still kind of living, I wouldn't say hand to mouth, but they're, making ends meet barely?
Yeah. Well, I think you're describing a couple of different personas there. One is a persona of an individual or a family who is aspiring to be middle class. And I say that with so much respect. This is the way I grew up and really wondered when I was young, watching my family grow in their opportunities and prosperity through great work and a lot of blessings, I remember when I was in middle school thinking, I may be the first generation of my family that doesn't sort of out-succeed the generation that came before me. And I remember a conversation with my father who said, no, that's not the way this family works. That's not the way America works. That is not the opportunity that you have. Put yourself on a path to work hard, to have good ideas, and to have the grit and determination over time to really use those blessings. And so one of the personas that you're describing is that persona. It's that family who is seeking to create optionality in their lives. Financial education, financial resilience is at the root of that. Starting early, knowing that families have options for how to build wealth in their workplaces through their employer-sponsored retirement plans, and we work with our business owner clients to build those plans because often that's the first time you get introduced to retirement planning in particular. And then that is your introduction to great financial advice. The other persona that you're describing a little bit is that family who, like mine again, I'll tell you another story, who's had their first grandchild And it changed everything. The first time I held Quinn in my arms, I called my financial advisor an hour later and I said, give her everything. And my financial advisor, because she is wise, said, what if you have another one and it's all gone? That won't. So this is why intergenerationally, 4 generations in my family who are planning at one time, that financial advice really comes into play so that 4 generations are getting what they need from the financial advisor and financial advisory firm that they're trusting.
So financial stability is so important, and you're talking about transfer of wealth, but many times people have not yet gotten to that stage yet. So what about how early should we be teaching kids about financial planning, and should it be part of the school curriculum?
Well, there are many who think it should, including Edward Jones, and that's why state by state now we're at least 24 states who are mandating financial education in the high school curriculum. Here's the issue. It's an unfunded mandate. They're not paying for it. And so companies like Edward Jones, and we're partnering with many companies, and I'm so glad to see this. We're not doing this on our own. We've educated 1 million learners through high school education, young adult education, digital as well as face-to-face education. And so financial education and literacy is so, so important.
Right, no, that's great. Okay, Michelle, please.
Sure. I'll go back a little bit to what Sheila said. I think technology and data are not scary anymore, right? They're so accessible. So many people can lean in and help you build the technology. In fact, AI can do a whole lot of it for you itself now. I would say that women should have the conviction and the courage to tackle some of these problems that we're talking about, right? And it's their brains that we want around this problem, right? Or the problems solving for designing financial systems, designing health systems that work with her at the center of it, right? I use an analogy of the airbags of cars that were designed for men and obviously didn't work for women, right? I think that at the core, our financial system is designed around a man, right? And if you bring women to the table to solve problems for women, they think about it in a different way.
Can you give a specific example of where you had to redesign one of the systems to suit women more than men?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been doing it my whole career, whether I was in banking or anything else, right? I feel like the women have a different risk appetite to men, and Penny talked a little bit about it before, right? But when you understand the personas of who you are dealing with, right? And then you think about, how do I educate them? How do I build trust, right? I think we've used technology and data to bring the right products to the right people at the right time, right? And that's what I think builds trust and enables more women to start thinking about the right things for their family. And it's not just once and done, right? We're trying to build financial longevity throughout people's lives. It's not about when you retire or when you get to this stage, right? It's making sure that the system is working for you the whole time.
But so, for instance, in insurance,
Yes.
probably price, according to health and longevity. And so women tend to live longer, so you've got a different sort of actuarial table there. But that system is already embracing all those differences. Is there kind of a gender, a difference that should be incorporated that isn't?
I think so, yeah. I think it's gender, it's race, it's, where you are in terms of your net wealth, right? It's, all of those things. It's overwhelming when you're being given financial advice, right? You don't have somebody really understanding at the heart for everybody. So maybe you have a financial advisor, maybe they will be listening and asking the right questions. But most people in this country don't have a financial advisor at their side, right? And so what we need to do is to make sure that we understand the personas and get the right products to the right people at the right time. And that's what technology and data can solve. I also think that all the advances that you see, with health markers and people saying, actually it's not 400 different attributes that really affect your health. It's 3 or 4, right? Understanding those, taking agency over those, right? The sleep. You know, whatever it is that's affecting your health, you need to take agency over it and start impacting those. We need to take that and put that into financial longevity. I've been thinking a lot about, and talking to a bunch of different people about whether we can create a financial longevity score, right? Something that says, do I have enough liquid assets that I can spend a year not earning anything, but afford it for my family? How many people have ever asked that when they talk to a financial advisor, right? It's not in the vocabulary of today.
So by the way, if you have any questions, please, you can use the QR code and send them in, and I'll try and bring them up to the panel. So can I ask you, Michelle, a little bit more about the longevity score? Can you talk a little bit more about how that was developed and why you think it's important and necessary?
So I don't think it has been developed. We're just starting to think about it. We've been doing a lot of discussions with our insurance clients, with our wealth management clients, to really kind of put this together, right? You know, when I worked in financial services for a long time, and we had a lot of indexes that could give us tons of information, right? That help people invest in the right things at the right time, and know what their strategies are and invest against those strategies. I don't think it really exists for women, certainly today, and even for all other parts of the population. It's something that's very new. People are talking about longevity now. They were never talking about it 2 years ago. People were worried about mortality risk way more than longevity risk. Now everybody is talking about longevity risk, right? And I think now is the time for us to work together to create those longevity markers.
And so, all right, everybody is nervous about whether Social Security will be around when we retire, right? So can you talk a little about what you're advising some of your clients, both you and Penny, in terms of how one prepares for the future?
Penny, do you want?
Well, I'll riff off of what you were just sharing, Michelle. We believe at Edward Jones that our industry should be held accountable for people's financial well-being. If our clients are going to entrust us with their hopes and their dreams and the dollars that we help them take care of to achieve those hopes and dreams, we ought to be able to tell them if they're achieving them. We call that financial wellness. And financial wellness, you could score it out, but we believe that it is much more personal than that. There are two primary aspects to it, however. One is objective and one is subjective. I can tell you based on your financial plan that we've built together, your needs and wants and your wishes and your lifespan, I can tell you the probability of actually achieving those things. But confidence is something very different. And sometimes people with the greatest amount of resources have the least amount of confidence. It's counterintuitive, but it is true. And some people who have very modest resources are very confident about their future and should be. And so as Edward Jones thinks about holding ourselves accountable for the outcomes that millions and millions of our clients are seeking to achieve, we call this financial wellness and are developing a way to determine the subjective and objective parts of that, knowing that you're never all the way there, but we want to put people on a path to improving it.
And I think transparency really builds trust and confidence, right? So if you can bring data, technology to the table, then people can see transparency, not just like where they're going to be financially in 10 years' time, but what are all the options available to them? How do they protect themselves, right? Yes. The protection side is just as important, for me at least, as the wealth accumulation, right? If you aren't protected and then something happens and that plan that you've got in place just goes up in smoke, you need things to fall back on, right? And that's the conversation we've been having with so many women, right, who find themselves suddenly at a point in their life where they've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's or something else terrible, and all of a sudden they're uninsurable, right? That's why we're saying you start early, start in your 20s, start in your early 30s, figure out what's important to you and your family, get that protection in place, right? You know, very few financial advisors will even talk to you about insurance.
Well, you know, long-term care, I mean, for the longest time, long-term care was the best deal around, right? Because they had priced it so low, and then they got wise and then have repriced it. So even if you know, are, you know, in long-term care insurance right now, if you get sick, they're going to raise the premium. So how is that a benefit?
I think it's too late then. Long-term care, I'm not a big believer personally in long-term care. I'd start much earlier on. I think also Social Security is too late too. I think people should invest in, you know, in folks, the government should invest in people when they're born, right? Not when they're about to retire.
No, that's a really good theory. I mean, it's just to actually, you know, I know that some people have said, okay, give them a baby bonds, right, $1,000 for when they're born, and then have it accumulate. Is that something that you have, you know, endorsed?
I mean, I would, yes. It's really not completely in my field, right? But I do encourage anybody to think early on around the, you know, their protection. I think it's great, honestly, fantastic to build as much wealth as humanly possible. To protect yourself and your family is super important, and to me, that's one of the basics.
So, Sheila, how are you integrating financial and health wellness? Because you are so driven by the care economy and this big, you know, challenge that looms ahead for many of us as we age, and we have families, you know, who we will probably have to help take care of. So how do you integrate all of that?
Yeah, in terms of financial, I definitely think it'll be in our future roadmap. And the beautiful thing about building a hub at OHI, and I know our board has discussed this, is that so many technologies are going to get built that we will just integrate as the hub. Because what makes us unique is we really handle the household and the family graph, and we want to make sure that we really have families trust us with that data. So they give us access to their calendars because we are the virtual assistant. They give us access to their contacts, and we take that very, very seriously. So as an example, we integrated Instacart. You know, they integrated New York Times, Weight Watchers, and us, and we have the largest average order value that actually helps that company, because now you don't have the mom going to the grocery store by herself anymore. We actually take the whole household, and she says Wednesday at 5 p.m. to the whole family. They can click a couple of buttons, and it puts it all in the same cart, and then we coordinate it with the family. And so we're kind of reducing that mental load on the family. Now, back to your thing on expenses. Our game plan is whether it's travel planning. We're meeting with a lot of startups. Whether it is booking doctor's appointments. We're actually integrating that this summer. We're going to make it so seamless and fast to free up families' times. And so, you know, Indra Newby and I were just on a panel at the Asia Society because it's Happy AAPI month in May. And so she pushed me on this question of the $1 trillion GDP. And she said, well, does that mean when you free up time, Sheila, are you envisioning women are going to work more? I said, no, women have the choice, Cheryl. They have the choice to either have more productivity at work, to work more. But to me, increasing productivity means the ability to have choice to do other things. And by the way, napping, resting, sleeping means we are clearer thinkers. We do things more efficiently. You know, we can make better decisions and bigger decisions. So in some sense, it actually helps with organization and financial planning, right? And so in my real mission here is to tackle overall mental health in the same way that you're encouraging sleep, right? That if we can build systems to make life easier, that's simple for families. That means all boats would float because everyone in our family's happy, we're inner satisfied, and we free up ourselves.
That's great. I have a question for Lauren, but then I also want to ask you to send in more of your questions, and then we'll start the Q&A, okay? So, Lauren, you have, you know, done so much in dementia, and can you talk about what is the most difficult part of the dementia caregiving that you have encountered, and how you've obviously brought in comedy. So how has that worked, and what lessons have you learned?
Yeah, I think, you know, in the dementia space, we have a lot of things working against us, but one of the biggest things is the stigma. The stigma that surrounds dementia, Alzheimer's, related dementias. And there's so much fear. And if you've lived through having a loved one with the disease, it can feel quite dark, quite hopeless. And so we did the thing that I think we've all sort of touched on, which is do what you know. Doing what you know can help you really move forward. And what we knew was comedy shows. And obviously, Alzheimer's and comedy may not be the most obvious combination, but what it did was show us that even in darkness, there can be light. And that's what we like to think of our events and our organization, and that, like, the journey of being a caregiver is dark. It just is. And sometimes that is the reality, but it doesn't mean you can't add on to that. And you can add on hope, and you can add on laughter, and you can add on community. And so that's what we do. And we try to find hope in an otherwise hopeless situation, which is why we found brain health. Science tells us that 4 out of 10 cases of dementia may be preventable or delayed, which would give us time to maybe have a scientific cure.
Yeah.
But that is hugely powerful information and gives us the opportunity to tell people you might be able to take control of this thing. Knowing your numbers, knowing your genetic risk factors gives you great power in an otherwise powerless situation. And that's what we've tried to do, is teach people that this isn't just this hopeless, scary thing. You can laugh, you can find light, you can approach it with some sense of hope.
Can I just add to this? The brilliance of it, as we know, I've been in the senior care space for a very long time, is that your inner child really comes out with dementia and Alzheimer's, and we know this.
In good and bad ways.
Yes, but in a way to celebrate with such dignity and respect around the dependent.
Yeah.
Right? That you can use joy and humor in those moments.
Absolutely. Well, you know, one of the best tools that a caregiver can have when caring is improv.
Yes.
Is you know, sort of a core comedic value, which is yes and, which is listening, which is accepting the reality of whatever situation you're in, and then saying yes, and then we can do this, and we can add in this, we can bring in this layer of hope or education, and really sort of improve the overall situation.
Okay.
Bring some more joy. Right? My father died of dementia, or not died of dementia, had dementia as he aged, and in the last 2 weeks of his life, there was a very important football match. He was a Brighton and Hove Albion supporter, and he couldn't remember the outcome of the game, right? And we watched it, I think, about 5 times, right? And I knew that they won 3-2 in penalties after a 2-2 score in the game, right? And we watched it so many times, and it brought him joy every single time, right? And it brought us a lot of comedic value, because he'd say, we have to watch this game, and we'd say, again? Sure.
Okay, so we have some amazing questions. Thank you, audience, for these incredible questions. So the first one is, so what would women's wealth look like today if this entire industry was built from the start, assuming women live longer, earn less, and carried more unpaid labor and dog and zag through carriers? What kind of financial system would that be? What would it take to improve the situation? Anybody?
I'm going to talk about 2 very, very specific things. This is a multifaceted challenge, right? But Lauren, I love what you said. You can do something about this today in your own family.
Yeah.
Thing 1 is ask your parents and talk to your children about values and legacy, because that's the way into talking about money. Money is behind all of that. Ask the question. So tell me about your relationship with your values and your legacy. That will get you to the conversation about your relationship with money. So have that conversation. The statistics say 50% of Americans are going to get an inheritance, small or large. They'd rather not get the inheritance than talk to their parents about it. That is so sad. So thing 1, talk to your family about values and legacy. That's the way into talking about money. Thing 2 is there are systems in the financial services and financial advisory space that enable us to intersect with the family when we see something.
Okay.
And what we have learned about Alzheimer's and dementia, we're the national sponsor for Walk to End Alzheimer's, have been since 2016. We've raised $50 million during that period of time, because Alzheimer's and dementia steals people's memories and their nest eggs. That's what we're trying so hard to create. There's something called trusted contact that enables us, our regulators enable us, if we see something, senior fraud, if we see Alzheimer's, if we see something and it shows up in the checkbook first, is what we've learned, we're able to engage with that family in a very confidential way and just begin to slow things down a little bit, so that that family can make decisions together at a time when, if decisions are made too quickly, nest eggs can go away. So ask your family of their financial advisor relationship, is there a trusted contact that we should put on this relationship and this account? Those are little things that are rebuilding the system to enable families to be more well through intergenerational transfer.
Okay, I have a couple of questions I'm going to group together. The stats about women's earning power, spending power, and financial empowerment and education never change, it seems. Why? What will it take to make impact for women in real terms? What is the greatest threat to women's financial empowerment today?
Systems that are still designed for men.
But in what way?
I think when you think about financial planning, right, it hasn't really changed for decades, right? People aren't asking the right questions. They're not designing it for her at the center. We know that women have non-linear careers, right? We know that they need products that help them throughout every stage of their life, right? Every financial advisor I've ever had, they're interested in telling me how much I should allocate to X, Y, and Z, and this wealth accumulation at the end, right? And I don't think that's a system designed for women to help them with their, joy, their happiness, and their ability to live effectively. You've heard all the stats that Sheila talked about in terms of how much more time they have to put into it. Designing these systems with her at the heart of it is really the only way to change the game.
Do you have a sense of how that would be designed differently? What would be different about it?
Honestly, I think it's asking a whole set of different questions and then really designing it for protection and for the future.
Anyone else?
I think it's going to happen whether we're managing it well or not. So today, women control as primary decider $10 trillion of assets. Over the next 20 years, that's going to quadruple. The birth rate is going down. Women are making different decisions about their careers and their lives. Automation is going to need to come into the space. We say automate the ordinary to humanize the extraordinary. So all of these systems that are coming together because of demographic shifts are going to mean that women's needs are going to be what innovators and business leaders and families are looking to as their guide star for how to build competitive systems.
Can I just add? Yeah. I think the other thing too, and I think about when I ran care.com, it's planning earlier on, and I love what both of you are advocating, planning earlier on and educating women that unfortunately childcare is going to become 25% of the average household income, and then you're responsible for senior care because we often outlive men. And we're also going to be responsible for our own care later, and we're supposed to fund that too. We not only take care of our husbands, assuming we stay married or remarried, and then also taking care of ourselves. That is the entire income that it would take. And so I think educating women earlier on about, I think, societal norms of this weight that we carry around care really does impact our financial stability. And so learning that independence because of what we value, back to your values, is going to be critical.
Yeah. Well, so that, go ahead.
And I was just going to jump in that I think so much of this starts with conversation. Yeah. And that women often hold it all in because they're holding it together. They're caring for their parents, they're caring for their kids, they're at their jobs, and they're like, I don't even have time to ask for help. And that is one of the greatest barriers, is that people suffer in silence through so many things, and without conversations where women are asking for help, that doesn't happen. And so you have to speak up, take it out of the darkness.
And I have 2 boys, 33 and 26, and I'm now a grandmother. So I will
Isn't
come
it
get advice. It's wonderful. I do feel that I have an important role as a feminist to raise 2 boys, and thankfully they are, to teach them as well about having their eyes open around the responsibility that women take on with regards to societal norms, and they must share fairly. That is part of their responsibility that I'm putting on my sons. And I think we need to do that for all of us, fathers and mothers, both.
Okay, so this is a big question. Yeah. And it gets to, begs this question is, how do we encourage our government, institutions, and high net worth individuals to fund areas like the care economy and women's health during a time of economic contraction and scarcity?
Okay, let me just jump in. There was a hosted brunch that my dear friend Rachel Springate invited me yesterday that Milken is actually hosting, which is freeing up DAF dollars to do it cleverly to try and solve funding emerging actual venture capitalists to fund women founders to find these types of solutions. And the more that we can fund emerging VCs so we can funnel more money than more than 2.3%, we will solve other solutions. And again, more female entrepreneurs going into this space. So I'm pretty passionate about that. And thank you for Milken for doing this.
Interestingly, the burgeoning conversation around private equity really plays into this. More and more of our more wealthy clients are saying, I want the way that I invest philanthropically and the way I invest to have an impact. So I'll go back to one of my earlier questions. If you're thinking, how did my dollars impact the world in a positive way, philanthropically and my investment dollars, you are not alone. And so as private equity and social impact philanthropy becomes more prevalent in the conversation, we're seeing more of our higher net worth clients very interested in having those conversations. And I think it funds some of these things we're talking about.
And again, impact investing does not need to be concessionary. This was repeated at our brunch yesterday. You can invest in social entrepreneurs. I mean, back then, Care.com was like, oh my gosh, a for-profit company that's helping help people? What's wrong with that? I mean, come on.
Everything's right
It
about
can't just be nonprofits.
Right.
Start companies that can actually focus on helping people.
Well, that was a big question and great answers, and we are out of time, but let's give a hand for our wonderful panelists. Thank you. And thank you, audience.